Hi, I'm Steven Janaka, and I've decided to sit down for once in my life. Um, but I'm here to present you with information that you haven't really heard, and and you should be interested in, essentially. So first, I'm gonna start by opening up with something that you have heard about, and you should care about, and you probably do care about, and that is depression and addiction. So currently, there's a lot of existential issues and a lot of physical issues that have led to the fact that there are a lot of people who are depressed and addicted to substance in America and across the world. So, I'm going to presume that everyone listening to this would probably like to hear some information that would benefit, a reduction in depression or addiction. So I'm going to hit you with some knowledge about something that you don't really know about, and that is psilocybin mushrooms. You probably do know about magic mushrooms, and you may have known that all magic mushrooms are psilocybin mushrooms, but just so you know, every mushroom under the category of magic mushroom is a psilocybin mushroom. And that means that those mushrooms contain in them two compounds, which are psilocybin and psilocin. And essentially, you ingest a magic mushroom and those compounds. Uh, Psilocin is converted into psilocybin, so essentially, once you ingest the substance, it is basically full-on psilocybin. Goes to your brain, and it is a mainly visual hallucination that's courtesy of Roland et al., and it is a Schedule 1 drug. You can figure that out on the DEA. You can go to the DEA website and figure that out pretty quickly. But yeah, like I said, mainly visual hallucination because of how it affects your brain, but you do still experience states of warped time, extreme euphoria, and potentially extreme anxiety. So I'm going to talk to you first about addiction. I have one study on addiction because I wasn't really focused on addiction. And that study was published by Johnson and Griffiths. There was 3 doses of psilocybin spread out over different times, and the participants were all addicted to cigarettes. There was 15 of them, and they gave 15 of those participants the 3 spread out doses. And after 6 months, 12 out of the 15 were no longer addicted to cigarettes, and they biologically verified this by I'm assuming they didn't detail how they tested this, but I know you can go into someone's body and see what substances they've been taking. For example, like you can take hair out of someone's head and see if they have THC running through their system, or if they've had THC running through their system for, the past couple months. So yeah, then they check back 2.5 years on those 15 participants, and 9 out of the original 15 were still no longer smoking. And these were people who were addicted to cigarettes. So imagine taking one pill or something that basically reverses your addiction. I mean, that's pretty crazy. There's a lot of potential there. And none of the participants suffered any sort of adverse effects from these 3 doses. So now we're going to move on to the more important issue, which is depression. In Johnson and Griffiths, on that very same paper detailing several studies, they referenced another study where there were 2 doses of psilocybin on a group of participants who were depressed. And the first dose was 10 milligrams, the second dose was 25 milligrams. Again, they were separate doses over a span of time. And everyone at the 1 week mark had a reduction in symptoms. So, I mean, that's good. And the reduction was sustained for 3 months. So even if they didn't last 3 months, I guess, which, I mean, that's pretty amazing. But let's say they didn't last 3 months and they lasted just a week. I mean, that's 10 milligrams or 25 milligrams of a substance that reduces your depression for an entire week. I don't think there are any depressants that can do that. I mean, I could be wrong, but again, there's a lot of potential here because psilocybin is a natural substance, and it's very alike natural compounds within your brain. So, for example, DMT, which is naturally occurring in your brain, is only a hydrogen and psilocybin has an extra hydrogen and an extra oxygen, and it looks just like DMT, except it has an extra hydrogen and extra oxygen. So it's very similar to natural compounds in your brain. But yeah, like I said, even if it was just 1 week, that's pretty crazy, just from one dosage of a substance. But we have a much more interesting study done by Rosalind Watts, where she had 20 participants, and they all had treatment-resistant depression. So treatment-resistant clinical depression. And so clinical depression in and of itself is a very difficult thing to deal with. It takes cognitive therapy, and also antidepressants, which is, kind of difficult in and of itself to find out what type of antidepressant you need. And so, these 20 participants, treatment-resistant depression, which means that even though they were getting cognitive therapy, and even though they were trying to figure out what antidepressant they wanted, they still were unable to cope with the depression that they had. And so they went into the study with Rosalind Watts, and they all ingested a single large dose of psilocybin in a very therapeutic setting. Obviously, all of these settings are therapeutic. You can't just give someone a psychoactive drug out in the street. That would be a very bad idea. But anyways, at the 6-month mark, she checked back at all of her participants. 6 were still in remission, which means that they were still feeling better. They were no longer treatment-resistant, clinically depressed. They were treated with some sort of substance. So 6 were good at 6 months. 11 experienced relief for 2 months, and then their symptoms came back. And 3 had nothing to little to take away from the experience. But they didn't experience, again, any adverse effects. And so what's interesting to point out here is that this is a 6-month check-in. So earlier, I said, wow, 1 week, that's great, and wow, 3 months, that's great. But you might be thinking to yourself, well, why would you want someone to take a psychoactive drug every week or every 3 months? Well, if this study were, let's say they did this on a larger scale and they found that this study resonates on a larger scale, and people do, in fact, only need to take a substance every 6 months, that's 2 times a year. So potentially, instead of taking an antidepressant every single day, which, by the way, you have to figure out what antidepressant you want. And if you go on a new antidepressant, I think there's I don't think there is a side effect called, it increases your likelihood for suicide, essentially, if the medication is wrong, because the majority of antidepressants alter your brain chemistry. And it's kind of a gamble to figure out which antidepressant is going to work for you. But something like this, no adverse effects, so let's say someone takes psilocybin in a therapeutic setting. Obviously, you can't, I'm not advocating for people to take this for fun, but let's say you take psilocybin in a therapeutic setting and it doesn't work for you, no adverse effects. You don't want to, you don't have an increased likelihood of committing suicide, but you do on antidepressants. And to tie this back in again to what I was saying about the 6 months thing, that's 2 times a year. That's one substance 2 times a year. Your depression is mediated. So that's why I think this little information I have to share with you is important, because there's a lot of potential for psilocybin and psilocin in a therapeutic setting to battle some of the biggest problems I think we've faced as a society for almost the entirety of human civilization, which are depression and addiction. So yeah, I don't think we should ignore this potential. I think we should do something about it. Thanks for listening, guys.